God's will.
What you're seeking is a blessing from God.
You must expect a miracle.
You have the power of choice.
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to Life Today Live. Now listen, I know you Americans at least are thinking about Thanksgiving, and you should. That's great. I think you Canadians already celebrated it or something. Anyway, did you know that November also is National Adoption Month? And I don't know who makes these things up, but I am fully on board with this one for all sorts of reasons, but I was adopted. So adoption is something that I am just a big advocate of, and so I like to talk about it. So you're going to learn about some interesting things about adoption, about the process, about the demand. I think that's always a question in people's minds, and we may get into some other pro-life issues because this is a pro-life issue. And so I'm excited to have back with me on Life Today Live Herbie Newell, who is the president and executive director of Lifeline Children's Services. He knows what he's talking about. So great conversation. You guys are invited to be part of the conversation. I always appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed or liked or followed, do that and hit share, and we'll have a good conversation. Herbie, great to have you back.
Randy, thanks for having me, and just so delighted to be able to talk about this topic that I know is near and dear to both of our hearts.
Well, explain to people why it is near to yours and what you do with it.
Yeah, well, even in your intro, as you talked about this being a pro-life topic, really our hearts as a family were bent towards adoption when my wife Ashley started working at a crisis pregnancy center right out of college, right after we got married. And we would sit literally around the dinner table and pray for these women that had come into her center and really just wrestle with what was the best answer for these women. Many of them were not sufficiently at a place in life where they could pull off being a single parent. And many of them already had kids that had been taken away either in foster care or by a family member. And God really started to open up our hearts and our lives to adoption. We both had been in families where adoption was something that had been a part of those families growing. And it really, for us, we saw adoption as a great option to a crisis or unplanned pregnancy for many women. And so we started to pray through and look at that. And the Lord just continually illuminated in his word, not only his call to care and to adopt and to foster, but also the analogous relationship that in our salvation, we are adopted into the family of God. So all of these things were really what built our passion and fanned our passion into flame.
So the obvious question is did you end up adopting?
Well, what's interesting is we went to a Stephen Curtis Chapman concert in 2003, which is, I think everybody and their brother went to that one, where he was announcing that he had just adopted Shohana. And we left that concert knowing that that's how we were going to build our family. The Lord had other plans for us. We have fostered some children, and we were going to pursue a young girl from Asia that ended up passing away. So the Lord hasn't brought that to fruition, but in a lot of ways, he has allowed us to be a part of so many family stories and so many children's stories that we're living vicariously through those families that we help.
Yeah. Just curious because, Life Outreach, we haven't facilitated directly, but more indirectly. We've made connections with some different adoption situations, Eastern Europe, China, back when you could. It's gotten very difficult. And so we're not directly in the business of handling adoptions, but we've connected the people who wanted to adopt with. We had some viewers actually adopt a little girl that was featured in one of our programs, and she ended up coming here and getting medical attention to where she could see because she was blind at the time as a little girl, and she graduated college. I think she went on to become a doctor here in the United States. Anyway, so we've seen these kinds of stories, but touch on. I'm curious about both the international situation with adoption because, like I said, I know it's gotten very difficult in China, but also the domestic demand for adoption.
Yeah, so starting with international, COVID-19 certainly put a hold to a lot of international
Mm.
adoption processes.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, I mean, China being the foremost of those, that even today, here almost at the close of 2022, it's still shut down. There's still not an end in sight for over 400 children that were matched and adopted in China by U.S. families. There's still not a way forward yet for those children to come home. I'm hoping now that we are post-election season here in the U.S. that now our politicians will get together and make a way and go and plead with China to release these children. However, every other country has reopened to intercountry adoption, and so there's the difficulties right now are more on travel. Every country has different travel concerns with COVID. Some require tests, some don't. But intercountry adoption is still a great option for families that are called to care for a child from another country. And we've seen great results, even in a post-COVID world, of families that have done just that. I think on the domestic side, in some regards, even sitting here, right, 5 months after the Dobbs decision, we are seeing more women call. We're seeing a whole lot more women that are interested in adoption
really?
and want to explore what that looks like. But we haven't yet seen those women give birth, obviously. So we're hopeful that more women, as they're choosing life and as they're in states where they have to choose life, that we'll see them explore options such as adoption, if that's what's best for them and what's best for their child.
How hard is it to get that kind of adoption information? If I'm a teen, or whatever, I'm a woman, I'm pregnant, I want to explore adoption. What's the starting point for women?
Yeah, so I think always they can go to any crisis pregnancy center or pregnancy resource center in the country. Those are not just outfitted to help you with a pregnancy test and determine pregnancy, but they also want to just help you look at your life affirming options. Like what are those life affirming options and what do those look like? And then they can always get in touch with Lifeline at lifelinechild.org. Our phone number is on there, or reach out to us on social media at Lifeline Child. But what we want to do is we want to put those women in a mentor relationship where they're going to have woman-to-woman counsel. We're going to help them understand what all their options are. And really, we don't want to only walk them towards adoption. We want them to explore those life-giving options as well. What does it really look like to be a parent? And, we want them to not have regrets that they chose adoption, but we want them to choose adoption because that's what they feel is best for both them and their child, and that it's something that is even catered towards them. So if a woman wants a more open adoption where she has a lot more contact, we want to make sure that we give her those options and she knows what does adoption really look like. It's not what you see in the Lifetime movies anymore, where a woman places her baby for adoption and she is an unknown entity and really will never see her child again. There is so much more that a woman can choose in the adoption process. She chooses the family, she chooses the level of openness, she chooses where the family lives, what they do. So there's a lot of choice for her. And she just needs to make sure that she gets to a place that sees her as a client, not just her child.
That's interesting because not the way it was when I was adopted, for sure. I was 25 years old and digging through court records, and only because I was fortunate enough to know the lawyer who knew the doctor, because they were friends who handled my adoption. It was private, and my parents, blessed that, and I tracked her down, and I talked to her recently. I've got a good relationship with her. Here's a question I asked her, and I'm curious what you hear as you walk through this. And this wasn't like our first meeting. This is years later. Do you find that women who give up their babies for adoption live with a sense of shame or guilt after that oftentimes?
That's a great question. And I know the women that I talk to, I would say the majority of them don't live with guilt or shame.
Good.
I think they live with a sense of fear that their child will resent them. But I think in the long run, they don't have resentment and they don't have any shame, because they look at this as they provide an opportunity for life for their child.
Yeah.
And the way that I help people see is, abortion, it stops any opportunity and any hope. So it's a negative hope. It's a negative opportunity.
Yeah.
When you place for adoption, yes, there's hurt, there's pain, there's real pain that these women go through. I don't want to minimize that at all. However, there's always the opportunity for hope. So what will my child become? What type of life can they live? And as people made in the image of God, we always want to point women, we always want to point children to opportunities of hope, because we have a great God that's working, he's alive, and he's active, and he is the author and the creator of life. And it's always better to give life the opportunity to flourish and to give life the opportunity of great, abundant hope in Christ, than it is to snuff that life away and have no idea. So talking to women that have placed for adoption versus women who unfortunately did go the abortion route, most of those women live with shame and regret and even this deep pit in their stomach of, well, who could that have been? What would my child have become? Where the women that have placed for adoption always have that persistent hope of what their child will be and who their child will become. That's at least what I've found. I'd be interested, Randy. I know you're interviewing me, but what your birth mother said.
So when I found her through court records and the phone book, because she was still in the area, in fact, I grew up not very far from a couple of half brothers, and her. And so when I found her, I called her blind, asked and identified her by her maiden name. And she goes, yeah, who's this, And I said, well, you don't really know me. I said, but 25 years ago, I'm guessing that you made a decision that was probably one of the more difficult decisions of your life when you gave me up for adoption. It's kind of quiet. And I said, I just wanted to let you know that I had a wonderful childhood. I had loving parents. I'm married now. I've got 2 children of my own. And I've had a wonderful, wonderful life. And I just wanted to say thank you. And after she quit crying, she said, can we meet? And I said, I would love to meet you. And that was, that was over 25 years ago. And like I said, I've got a wonderful relationship with her. And eventually found my biological father. They were not together. And so that's another great story. So, if someone's watching and you have either given someone a child up for adoption or you're contemplating it, just know that you are giving us a chance. And it's okay. It's a good thing. And be confident in that. And I was never resentful for her. I figured that she was probably putting me into a position that she thought was better for me. And in fact, she probably was, although she got married about 3 years after I was born. And they're still married today. And so her life stabilized. But at the time that I was born, it was very, very difficult for her. And so I would say to anyone who is contemplating that, if you feel good about it, it's good. Some of us turn out okay. So that's sort of my experience, obviously, as an adoptee, and I am passionate about the topic. My turn to ask the questions, though. But I like to say that because I don't want women to ever feel shame or the what if or hesitation to go that route. So if I could encourage anyone in that way, I want to.
And I would just say that those are brave women because they are demonstrating unselfish love, right?
Yeah.
They're not thinking of themselves. They're going through 9 months of pregnancy, thinking about a child and thinking about a family, not thinking about themselves. And, we even see that unselfish love. And I like to say, the adopted mom that's sometimes overlooked in or the birth mother that's sometimes overlooked in the Bible is that woman that comes to King Solomon in 1 First Kings, and the story goes that in the middle of the night, two women had babies. One woman, her baby passed away, and so she switched the babies, and they come to King Solomon, and King Solomon says, "I'm going to cut the living baby in half." And the birth mother says, "By no means cut him in half. Let her have the child." And that's unselfish love that says, I don't want anything to happen to my child. I don't want my child to die. I want my child to flourish. And I'd rather another have my child than something happen to my child. And so that's unselfish love. That's brave love. And that's what your mom, your birth mother has. And that's what all of these women who choose adoption have. They have a brave, unselfish love.
Yeah. And I just know that's true from firsthand experience. It's just true. We're talking to Herbie Newell, as the president and executive director of Lifeline Children's Services, and we're celebrating National Adoption Month. And it's okay, you can celebrate it all 12 months of the year like I do, but I just love shining the spotlight on this. Here's one question that people often have, especially when you get into any kind of abortion discussion or debate. How many are there enough people who want to adopt for all these children to be born that aren't either the parents don't want to have a child or can't take care of the child? Are there enough adoptive parents?
Yeah, so right now we know that there are anywhere between, that's what common statistics are telling us, about 1 million and 2 million families that are ready to adopt. So that means they have shown some initiative to say, I want to go through the process of adoption. Last year, Planned Parenthood reported, if their numbers are not deflated, they reported 383,000 children that were aborted. So if all of those children were born, we would have had plenty of families to adopt every last one of those children. Now, of course, Randy, we also know that if you go and say, well, what families would be willing to adopt if given the opportunity, that 1 to 2 million is going to grow exponentially. Yeah. So that 1 to 2 million are just those that are ready, have started the process in some way, have gotten the ball rolling in some way. But there are millions of more families here in the United States that if they knew of an opportunity and if they knew of a need, I'm assured that they would step forward and say, we will gladly bring this child into our home. The problem here, even at Lifeline with our domestic program, is not that we have too many children and not enough families. It's we have so many families, but so many children are being aborted that there aren't as many placements. So again, 383,000 abortions a year and 1 to 2 million families that are ready today to adopt. It's not a lack of families. It is that we live in a culture of death, which eliminates life, as opposed to encouraging people to come around and to foster and to love and to adopt that life.
Yeah, and I could spend the rest of the program complaining about some of the politicians and the people that just seem, they treat an abortion like it's a vacation. It's like, hey, come on out, we'll pay your airfare and give you a hotel and tickets to Disney World or something. It's like Disneyland would be more accurate. But anyway, I want to do my best to stay focused on the positive side, the adoption side, for at least this program. But the two are tied together. And just know, if you are someone who is pro-life, and you're talking to someone who is pro-abortion, and this issue comes up, just know there are enough people to adopt any child that the mother can't take care of or doesn't want to take care of. And so that is the truth. That is an option. It is the better option. And so choose adoption. How hard is it, Herbie, for people who are considering adoption to go through that? Is it expensive? Is it a long vetting process? Is it a hassle?
Yeah. So, when you look at the vetting process, folks are going to say, well, that's long and arduous, and why is it easy for someone to get pregnant who doesn't want their child, but it's so hard to go through a process? Why do I have to have a home study? Why do I have to get fingerprints and background checks? And again, all of that is, in a fallen world, it's making sure that you're placing a child into a safe place. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, we want to be able to look these women in the face and say, hey, we know these families, we know they're safe, we've vetted them. And so you can have the confidence of knowing they are who they say they are. So that process is as much for the protection of the child as it is also for the reassurance of that mom, that birth mother, to say, hey, we know these families, they aren't people that just came in off the street. Expense. There is a lot of expense involved with adoption. Now, when you look at it, Randy, again, I think a lot of people realize and look at biological children and say, well, it's not expensive to have children, but it's because we have medical insurance, right? And
it's still expensive, man.
And it's still expensive.
Still
That's right.
That bill.
But most people have medical insurance and they're paying a deductible or they're paying, some type of premiums. There are real expenses that go into an adoption. But the good news is there's a federal tax credit that's about $15,000. A lot of states, actually 26 of the 50 states, have a credit as well on state taxes. There's so many granting organizations. So Show Hope is one of my favorite out of Nashville, Tennessee. Life Song for Orphans out of Illinois, ABBA Fund, even the Coors Family Foundation. There are lots of opportunities. And so at Lifeline, we actually have a how to fund your adoption guide. And most of our families will all adopt without any debt. And they will all adopt actually having most of their expense covered through either a grant or an income tax credit.
So those organizations you mentioned are ones that will help cover the cost of the parents who are adopting.
That's correct. And they stand ready, willing, and able to do so. So I would say domestic adoption is going to be anywhere in the neighborhood of about 20 to 25,000. Now, if you go through some private organizations, it could be more. I would say you're going to want to look in the 20 to 25 range. Those are probably the ones that are ministry that aren't going to pass all the costs to you. I think that's important. You want to look at what the fee arrangement is. International adoption is a little bit more, it is a little bit more expensive because of the travel engaged and some of the other complexities. I would say it's more in the 30 or 25 to 32 33 range for intercountry adoption.
I don't think it's, I don't know, maybe it is common knowledge and I just didn't know it, but I don't think the average person at least knows that there is funding oftentimes available for the parents who want to adopt. So that right there is very interesting. Let me ask this. If there's someone who wants to fund adoptions, how do they do that?
Yeah. So first, for that family that is looking, if you need more information, at our website at lifelinechild.org, we have a how to fund your adoption book that goes through all of those grant organizations and that goes through all those ways that you can adopt without debt and you can actually fundraise for your adoption. However, if you are someone who says, you know what, I'm at a stage or a place where I'm not called to adopt, but I'd love to help someone who is, you can give to any of those organizations. At Lifeline, we actually have something called the Hope Adoption Fund, and that helps us be able to give scholarships to families that are working with us to help underwrite their fees. A lot of these grant organizations, for instance, will they'll give you the grants, but they're after the home study or the vetting process. So what we want to do, and we're actually running this right now in November, is we'll give money to a family up front to go ahead and start the vetting process. So they don't have any money out of pocket to go ahead and get vetted, and then they can start to get the grants from places like Show Hope and Life Song and ABBA Fund, especially for those families who may not have any money right now. They can have enough money to raise a child, but they don't have the extra money to go through the adoption process. So we want to help families and underwrite that process. But I know Show Hope and Life Song and ABBA Fund and all of those would be glad to have someone who wants to come in and underwrite those adoptions. And then the other thing is a lot of churches now have adoption funds. Most of those funds are actually run by Life Song for Orphans, who we mentioned previously. But you could also go to your church and say, hey, I want to help families in our church family who are called to adopt. And that's another option.
Yeah. I love it. Now, does Lifeline operate in all 50 states? Is it, or is it a state-by-state thing?
So we work with families in all 50 states and women in all 50 states. The only thing we're precluded from the 50 states is our foster care program. So we can only, if someone's wanting to be a foster parent, we can only help those families in the 17 states in which we're licensed. But if you want to adopt, or you're a woman that wants to talk about what placing a child for adoption would look like, we can work with anyone in all 50 states.
What about Canada?
Can't do Canada. So we're unfortunately we're limited to the United States.
So yeah. So if you're north of the border, you'll have to check into the what it looks like in your country. And I expect that's it's kind of a country by country thing. I would think. So
it is. Now, if you're a United States citizen or green card holder and you live abroad, so an expat or someone who lives abroad that's a green card holder, a passport holder, as long as one parent is a U.S. citizen or a green card holder, we can help those families adopt.
Interesting.
We can, yeah.
Interesting. All right, man, this has been so informative and educational, and I felt like I knew a lot, but I learned a lot just talking through this. This is great, and I think everybody should know this, especially if you're, somewhat active in the pro-life movement, because this is a part of it. So, is there anything that I didn't ask that you want to mention before I let you go?
Yeah, I would just say, I know right now in this post-Roe world that one of the things that the pro-abortion lobby is trying to do is not just attack our pregnancy resource centers, but they're really trying to attack the idea of adoption. And so I think as pro-life people, we need to be able to know what adoption looks like. We need to be able to speak of it informatively, and we need to speak out and say that abortion should not be a form of birth control. Abortion should be illegal, and we need to make sure that all of our life options are front and center, and that women know what those are, and they know how to educatingly choose one. And so what better time than National Adoption Month to let that woman, maybe on your street, in your sphere of influence, who's going through an unplanned or crisis pregnancy, know not only about the option of adoption, but that you would come around her and say, hey, we'll support you. If you want to be a parent, if you have someone you want to get married to help raise that child, or if you want to look at adoption, we want to support you and walk life with you. So I hope that as pro-life people, we won't just be pro-baby and pro-child, but we will be pro-woman and helping her know what her choices are.
And historically, we have been. It's been the churches doing a lot of these adoption things and all the crisis pregnancy stuff, and we're not going to stop. And so if you are in need, or if you want to be involved, or just help other people that are adopting, you got a lot of opportunities. Check out lifelinechild.org, and you can link to other great organizations. Just do something, Let's do something. Herbie, thanks again. I appreciate your insight and your time.
Oh, thanks, Randy. It's always a pleasure.
Appreciate all you guys out there. Hit share. I mean, come on. We're about to get into the Christmas season, and we're talking about a birth that changed the world. And you never know. You get involved in adoption and helping others and spreading the word, you could change the world. So I think it's possible. I'm doing my part, and I'm an adoptee. Appreciate you being here. Come back. We got more for you. Lots of good information and inspiration. So come back. We'll see you again next time here on Life Today Live.
Surely you are ready now to believe him, to receive him, and to receive the healing for body, mind, and soul.